So it's Andrew Hunziker with Dope CFO. Today we've got Sam Richer with the Arizona Dispensary Association. I'm super interested to learn about this. It's funny. So in our program, one piece of how we find clients, I tell people the most fun way, and by the way, accountants hate marketing and finding clients. To me, the most fun way to find clients is actually to get involved in this industry and movement and participate. I went to the Oregon Cannabis Retailers Association brew pub event like 5 years ago, and I met about 40 business owners, got clients, had fun, drank beer. So I'm super excited to learn more about you, but why don't you start with your kind of background, how you got into cannabis at all, and give us kind of your short bio, and then we'll jump into ADA.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a cannabis consumer for quite a while, longer than I would like to admit here, just in case my parents are listening. Just kidding. But I've been professionally working here with the cannabis community for about 2.5 years. Formally came on board as the executive director of the Arizona Dispensaries Association right when we launched the initiative that folks in Arizona know as Proposition 207, right in kind of the middle of Q4 in 2019 is when we formally launched that. But I was lucky enough in my previous life, in my previous capacity, as a contract lobbyist to actually begin some of the groundwork on that initiative even before it was just an initiative. Maybe we'll use a little joke here and say that I've been around since the initiative was just a twinkle in Steve White's eye.
So you were getting started. So maybe that's a good jump into ADA. How long has the ADA been around altogether? Because I know Arizona's had medical legal for years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's actually one of the things that I love to talk about in terms of Arizona cannabis policy. So many folks probably are familiar that listen to your podcast with California's long history as a medical market prior to adult use. But what folks don't really remember is that Arizona had an initiative on the ballot the same year that California did. So back in 1996, we first went to the voters and asked for their approval to create a medical marijuana program. And our voters did give us that approval in 1996. But the first thing that the Arizona State Legislature did when they came back into session the following January was refer that question back to the voters with a whole bunch of prohibitionist language and activity. And it kind of failed even before it got off the ground back in the late 90s. So that led to some really interesting things. But the long and the short of that story is we have been working on cannabis policy for 25 years here in Arizona, just as long as folks have been doing it in California. We just have a little bit less of a favorable political environment, let's say it that way, in terms of embracing the plant and embracing cannabis. So we have had a formal medical program since 2012. We went back to the voters in 2010. They said yes, and after some legal wrangling with, at the time, Governor Brewer, Jan Brewer was governor at the time, but the first door was open, I believe it was December 8th of 2012 was the first medical transaction here in the state of Arizona. So we went back to the voters in 2016. We narrowly lost that question by just about 2 percentage points. But then we kind of reformulated it, really kind of took some feedback from our voters and the broader public, and came back with a much stronger initiative in 2020. And that question won the support of Arizona voters by a margin of 20 points. So we won by 60-40. And the other really fun thing, just for your next party trick, you can share with your friends that more people voted yes on Prop 207 than for any other question or candidate in the history of Arizona. So John McCain was a pretty popular figure here in Arizona, but more people voted for legalized cannabis in Arizona than the late Senator McCain. So pretty excited about that.
Well, I love anecdotes like that. That is awesome. And that's what I tell people at the end of the day when they're like, well, what cannabis may not legalize or this, that, or the other. And I've been saying this for quite some time. When you have such a vast majority of Americans agreeing on anything, that's a great thing about our country. Yeah. So we are in the most divided country I've ever lived in 60 years of my life by a long shot. And but that said, we're the most unified 7 out of 10 Americans, according to the last Gallup poll, want medical pot. And that's why medical pot's going to be legal, not just here, it's going all over the globe. But let's jump into Arizona because I want to learn how other people can use it. So tell us tell us what are the key things that ADA does. Like, what are your members, just dispensaries, or say, for example, do accountants join on too, or whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really the history or the progeny of the association was all of those licensed owners. So Arizona is what your listeners might be familiar with as a limited license state. So even once we actually award the social equity licenses, of which there will be 26, and that is expected to happen sometime later this calendar year, we will have around 169 licenses that exist in the program, and that will likely be the ceiling until things change federally. But we have what's called a vertically licensed market. So that one license has all of the expressions of the supply chain nestled underneath it. So you might see, like in California, there's, I stopped counting, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 different licenses. In Ohio, you have, a license for cultivation, a license for manufacturing, and a separate license for retail. And across the country, there's a variety of different ways for that. Well, manufacturing, processing, cultivation, and retail all happen under one singular license here in Arizona. So while the majority of our membership are those licensed owners, we have a significant number of independently owned and operating wholesale players in the market. So as an example, I'm wearing a hat today that you can see on our video call here, right? But of 1906, a great Colorado-based company. They do some pressed pills kind of thing. Well, they are just entering the market here in Arizona. They're doing that. They lease the ability to operate from one of those license owners. So it's not like they own their own license or acquired a license to come into the market. There's a strategic partnership type of thing that happens there. So a lot of regional or national brands are still have exposure into the Arizona market, even though they don't necessarily own their own license. Yeah. So
and that's a whole different topic. I mean, my two home states, where Oregon, where I live now, and Oklahoma, are both free market, anybody, everybody. My personal opinion is the limited markets are going to go by the wayside eventually, because it just invites too much unfairness. And when you only allow 100 licenses, it'd be like only allowing 50 liquor stores in the state of California. It's just a bad idea. But over time, I think that'll, but you brought up another good point. We've been focused on, so at the AICPA conference where we spoke last week, and some of my student members were actually on the social equity panel. We had another follow-up call we just posted actually on our YouTube podcast channel with Shailene Title and Nina Parks, who are big social equity advocates, talking about different states and how different states are approaching this. But if Arizona has 130 licenses and 30 of them are social equity, that's a pretty decent share. Do you all see around that topic any issues? One issue is, even if you give a license to someone who's disadvantaged, they need lots of other resources and tools and money because a vertically integrated cannabis company anywhere in the U.S. is really, to do it right, you're talking 10 million at least. I mean, I've seen farms blow through 10 million and go under. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, and I don't mean to sound too much like, a politician with this, but I'll just preface this by saying, our entire focus with Proposition 207 really was centered around restorative justice efforts. There was a large, a significant amount of money, both in an initial investment, but also ongoing investment that goes into programs designed to attempt to repair some of the harm done by decades of failed drug policy here in Arizona. And a big piece of that was the social equity licenses. But I want to be clear that, you know, my role and the role of the association is to protect and kind of advance the regulated cannabis marketplace and its current operators. So we have not necessarily commented on or been influential at all in the process of the social equity licenses, because we have a clear belief and a unified belief that those licenses aren't for our members. Those licenses aren't for our operators.
Okay, so they're for the
As
other.
an association, we will absolutely welcome these 26 award winners into our membership and support them with the regulatory and compliance and legislative work that we do on a day-to-day basis. But until that time, we haven't been really involved in that process because we didn't want to kind of, whether through reality or perception, kind of have the afterglow that you might see in some of the other markets where some of the larger corporations or some of these folks that, you know, may be painted in a much more negative light and trying to kind of vulture in or you know, some of those types of phrases on these social equity licenses. But, you know, we're our hope is that these 26 licenses will go to the folks who have been most harmed by the drug war and not those who have found success in regulated cannabis to date.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And then Arizona will have to grapple with, once they give the license to that person, how do they funnel dollars and resources to them without just gaming? Because there's lots and lots of wealthy sharks out there that want to jump all over those licenses and say, here, I'll give you $5 million, but we're going to do a backdoor legal deal or whatnot. Let me ask you on we glossed over a little bit. So I know you all, the dispensary owners, is there any place to say we have accountants in the program in Phoenix to come to either join ADA or provide a presentation to ADA around 280E or what you should be thinking about for tax or accounting?
So yes, absolutely, and we do that currently. So happy to talk about that. Sorry, you're right in identifying that I did gloss over that. So I would say that a large majority of our members are what we would call plant touching, but we do have opportunities for non-plant touching members to be a part of that. I try to avoid that negative sounding term of ancillary, right?
Yeah.
I think I tend to talk about the ecosystem of regulated cannabis, and the folks that touch plants are very important in that ecosystem, but also we need folks in their green visors and desk lights to help us make sure the numbers work too, right? So absolutely have opportunities for CPAs and
Awesome.
tax accounting firms, and I'll tell you that among other folks that have indicated interest, we have a handful of firms that are already there, names that you may recognize across your leadership. Cone Resnick is a very active and important member here, as is Price Kong. They're kind of one of the local folks here in the market. So we and through their support, we have great relationships with our Department of Revenue, and we have ongoing kind of education as it relates to 280E and some of the other tax and accounting issues that our Arizona operators have to deal with.
Okay, well that's awesome. And actually, I was just speaking with some of the people at Cone Resnick at the AICPA convention in Vegas last week, and it's great so the big firms that come in for every state, you'll have, you know, the Cone Resnicks, the Markhams, the national firms, and that's great. They're going to focus on audits and assurance and M&A and public filings, et cetera. But then you'll also need 99% of the license holders will end up also with bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs that are doing what I call the nuts and bolts that the big firms can't do because they have independence issues. So the bookkeeping, payroll, HR, controller, CFO works, tax planning. And so that's where I think the dope CFO people can shine. Let me just ask you what you all are hearing. So there is a ton of misinformation around 280E and multi-entity strategy and non-cannabis divisions within. What are you guys hearing down there on your side? Because I'm kind of an evangelist on letting the license holders know they're getting a lot of bad advice oftentimes, and buyer beware, the IRS is coming in a big way this year especially.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been a rallying cry from myself, but also a lot of our members in that, if you think that cannabis compliance is hard today, just wait until we're federally legal, right? State
Yeah.
regulators may be tough, but for those in your, listenership and membership, you know how difficult it is to work with the folks at IRS and other federal agencies. So I think that your caution there to have folks get ready for things coming down the line is really important. And I think one thing that I would say too is just an answer in terms of the misinformation that's going around across the country, but obviously here in Arizona as well, is that I would just say that I think that for most folks, either on the operations side or in the support services side, we're all doing our best. And I think that the information changes so rapidly. I mean, I think there was that 3-month window there earlier this summer where the IRS sent out a variety of different memos, and a couple of firms sent out like reactionary education memos after those memos, and there was just so much information going back and forth. It was really hard to pin down what was right now versus what people were prepping for in the future versus kind of what the overhype or over speculation might have been. So I think it's just really hard to kind of try to find the signal out of the noise in cannabis generally, and probably no more so in the accounting and financial pieces of cannabis operation than any other piece.
So what I want to, those are all great points, and I want to reflect back a couple of things to think about in this, and I'm speaking now directly to Arizona vertically integrated license holders. This is what I would tell you from, and by the way, I think I spoke at 6 different sessions at the 2-day AICPA event and moderated as well. I kind of led the event, but there were also national attorneys there that were actually trying cases with the IRS. And I would tell you a couple things to consider. First and foremost, the foundation, whatever you do, whatever Arizona wants or IRS or tax, you need rock solid accounting. We're finding 8 out of 10 cannabis firms in all states don't even get close to that standard. And I call it building a permanent audit trail. Make sure you've got a qualified accountant that actually has the tools and knowledge. There's very few of them actually out there to do the cost accounting. So if you're a vertically integrated license holder, you need complex cost accounting. And if your accountant doesn't have the tools and work papers and systems, you would be smart to contact a dope CFO VIP member. That's one point. Second point is it's easy to get lost in, the laws are changing all the time and this, that, and the other. 280E hadn't changed in a long time. It's one sentence. And it says, if you're a license holder, you get no deductions and no credits. There's been several games that have been played in the early years around non-cannabis divisions and multi-entity strategies in particular. Those have lost over and over and over again in the court. So if you don't want to be the guy or girl that the IRS shows up in 3 years and sticks you with $1 million fine because you did 280E wrong, you should consider being careful if someone's pitched to you one of those strategies around allocating a lot of losses to non-cannabis divisions or multi-entity strategy. We call it trying to beat 280E, and we say it's a bad idea. The best strategy is build your brand and product and revenue, and you can value your company that way. But I just say buyer beware, be careful. The IRS is really coming very quickly to these companies, especially vertically integrated. The good news about being vertically integrated, you got more opportunity under 47011 to actually get some costs into cost of goods sold and lower your taxable income. So there is some good news, especially for vertically integrated cannabis companies on that side. But let me ask you another question right now about licensing in Arizona already. You mentioned this cap. Is that for forever till federal legalization, or could this go back to vote and change again to allow? Because what about the small guy that just wants to open a delivery company or a small grow or whatever?
Yeah. So, and that was what I was attempting to go into with this, like with the hat I'm wearing today with 1906, or you mentioned that you work in Oregon, so you're probably familiar with Wild.
Yeah.
Right? So Wild operates here in Arizona. So we have this function where you have the license ownership, but through strategic partnerships, or since a lot of your membership knows this type of lingo, right? It's a lease, right? It's either a JV on one portion of your license, or just a straight up rental or lease arrangement from that license to operate. So we probably have, in addition to the 125 licenses that are open currently and operating, we likely have double, if not triple that number in independently owned and operated companies
Okay.
that exist underneath that, but through a strategic partnership, either a leased arrangement or a joint venture, to help kind of bring those folks around. So a lot of brands that folks know in other markets are thriving here in Arizona, whether that's Wild, Wana, Connected Cannabis, and Alien Labs are here in the market. Stizzy, a very popular cartridge brand in California, is operating here in Arizona, all through those types of lease arrangements and strategic partnerships.
Well, let me ask you, so that covers the big guys that can do multi-state, but what, say I'm just Sally Smith and I want to do a small grow, can I contact a license holder and say, I'd like to do I'm going to grow a couple of craft strains, and I'm just a small person. Can I operate under someone else's license somehow if I'm just there in Phoenix or whatever?
Yep. The easy answer to that is yes. There are like micro cultivations that happen in this market, and we have North America's largest cultivator,
Really?
in Northern Arizona. They have 80 acres that are fully under glass and operating up in Snowflake, Arizona.
Snowflake, is that?
That's Copper State Farms up there. Yeah.
Wow. They're the biggest in the US right now?
Biggest in North America is so the most square footage of active production. So really excited, and they're not the only ones either. There are quite a few folks that are coming online, right? I think the excitement around adult use here in our market, but also as we inch closer and closer. I mean, we're still probably 3 to 5 years out, right, from federal legalization. But when that happens, if you pull out your maps, either for those of you who, like me, grew up driving across the country on summer road trips, so I love a physical atlas. I love a physical map board. Just like hop up on Google Maps, you'll see how important Arizona is going to be from a distribution hub model in a legalization moment. And I've heard multiple CEOs of the multi-state organizations say that they will not invest in cannabis cultivation east of the Mississippi River post federal legalization. So if you translate that into the millions and millions of square feet that are coming online for indoor cultivation and greenhouse cultivation here in Arizona, most of the cannabis that Americans consume within a decade will be cultivated, processed, or manufactured somewhere in the West Coast, either Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, California, Oregon, and Washington. That will be where your cannabis comes from, regardless of where you're in. And I'm sorry, just a fun fact. This is not cannabis specific, but just to kind of underscore that point, if you have a salad between Labor Day and Memorial Day, there is literally a 90% chance that lettuce comes from Yuma, Arizona. A large majority of the lettuce consumed in America is grown right here in southwestern Arizona during the winter growing.
And it'll be interesting because, of course, when I think of the South, I think of massive tobacco crops, cotton, where I'm from, Oklahoma and Texas. I know when I've talked to Texas and Florida people, I always say those are going to be some two big markets as well, because they're massive population, massive farmland, and decent weather. But it'll be interesting to see. Let me ask you too about, as we're kind of wrapping up on specifically on ADA, Arizona Dispensary Association, where can people tell us kind of what resources you mainly offer your members and where people can find you as well. And then we'll also have backlinks and all that as well in the show notes.
That's wonderful. So I always appreciate to get the opportunities to get the word out about the thriving market that we have here in Arizona. In terms of some of those kind of resources, because we are a paid membership and you know the trade association, a lot of that is kind of only open or available to our members. But regardless, we are available on Instagram. Anybody can follow us at Arizona.dispensaries. We're also on LinkedIn at if you just search Arizona Dispensaries Association. And of course, our website is azdispensaries.org. And Andrew, I'll make sure that you have my email address and all my contact information for your listeners for all that, because you know a big piece of Arizona is that we're very accessible. You know, we're ready to tell our story and welcome people here to the Grand Cannabis State, and any day of the week. And you know that's a fun little play on the Grand Canyon, right? Yeah. Known as the Grand Canyon State. But I think over the course of the next few months and years, folks will be reintroduced to the Grand Cannabis State, and I can't wait for that to happen.
Well, that is awesome. And I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been hugely influential. I will bet you anything some of our Dope CFO members will be sending you an email because they'll see this first. And then, but great information for everybody. And we have kind of two audiences. We get a lot of accountants, but we also get a lot of farm owners and dispensaries and investors as well. And so I think we're all, like you say, the ecosystem, we're all trying to push this movement forward. It's time and it's worthwhile. And so great to see you. And thank you for being on the show.
Excellent. I love that. Thank you. Happy to be here. And I'll just have a request for your listeners, especially those in the accounting and financial worlds, always on the hunt for a really good cultivar for data entry. So if anybody has their favorite, you know, uplifting, energizing strain that they use before they do some data entry, give it to me. I don't know if it's Jack Herrera, Durban Poison. Yeah. Somebody's got to give me a good.
Know the latest. All right.
Hey, thank you so much.
You all, and thank you all for joining. And you can check out more about our programs at dopecfo.com.